America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Get up, everyone. It's an important anniversary. 19 years ago today, I'm Hugh Hewitt and TheReliefFactor.com inside a very wet beltway where it was Noah-like yesterday. 19 years ago, I was trudging up the steps of the old studio in California. I had the shift after this, the 6 to 9 a.m. shift in California in those days. National show, but it was 9 to noon on the East Coast and 6 to 9 on the West Coast. I walked into the studio just before broadcast time, and in those days, Dwayne would come to work. And I said, Dwayne, somber music today, small plane has hit the World Trade Center. Who knows how it happened, but it did. That was the news report I'd listened to driving to the studio at 6 a.m. in the morning, California time. Sat down and was on the air for 8 hours of horror. I've got the tapes. Many people still come up to me today and tell me I was the person who told them about 9/11. Still happens more on the West Coast than anywhere else, of course. And I don't dwell on it. It's just that it's been 19 years, and I can remember it like yesterday, thinking 50,000 people, and saying 50,000 people were dead on the air, thinking that the country was under attack in D.C. at 6 or 7 locations as opposed to 2. Just stunned, alarmed, but trying to remain calm and doing my job. It was quite the day, and we remember it. So I thought I would begin today with, since he's running, Joe Biden on ABC News with Peter Jennings back in 2001. He was on the air as well that night, cut number 11.
Senator's the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, so he is party to all of the information in the intelligence community. Was the intelligence community so taken up with the idea of chemical and biological warfare against the United States that they didn't pay enough attention to this possibility?
Well, they clearly understood this was a possibility. The problem has been we have been focusing, in my view, I don't want to second-guess anybody here. Look, the prospect of a chemical, biological, pathogen probability is real. Some of us, literally as recently as yesterday, I spoke to the National Press Club and talked about the fact that it's just as easy to fly from National Airport into the White House as it is to, do the same thing in New York. I mean, look, we know all these possibilities exist.
So the vice president said on 9/11, 19 years ago, that he was calling his shot. That it was very easy to fly into the Capitol or the White House. Actually, the speech he gave on 9/10, this is what he said, talking about terrorism a day before terrorism.
But even the Joint Chiefs says that a strategic nuclear attack is less likely than a regional conflict, a major theater war, terrorist attacks at home or abroad, or any number of other real issues. We'll have diverted all that money to address the least likely threat, while the real threat comes to this country in the hold of a ship, the belly of a plane, or smuggled into a city in the middle of the night in a vial in a backpack. And I ask you, you want to do us damage? Are you more likely to send a missile you're not sure can reach us with a biological or chemical weapon because you don't have the throw weight to put a nuclear weapon on it and no one's anticipating that in the near term? With a return address saying it came from us, here's where we are? Or are you more likely to put somebody with a backpack crossing the border from Vancouver down to Seattle? Or coming up the New York harbor with a rusty old ship with an atom bomb sitting in the hull? Which are you more likely to do? And what defense do we have against those other things?
Well, you see, he did talk about terrorism the day before. He did not talk about airplanes hitting the car. That was 19 years ago. Joe Biden hasn't changed. I mean, he's cognitively declined, but he hasn't changed. Vice President Trump President Trump was in Michigan yesterday after the vice president was in Michigan 2 days ago. And here's what he had to say about Michigan yesterday, cut number 28.
Does anybody want to have somebody from Antifa as a member and as a resident of your suburb? I don't think so too much. Say, darling, who moved in next door? Oh, it's a resident of Antifa. No, thank you. Let's get out of here. Let's get the hell out of here, darling. Let's leave our suburbs. Oh, I wish Trump were president. He wouldn't have allowed that to happen. And that's exactly right. I won't allow it to happen.
He continued, cut 29.
Michigan will decide whether we will quickly return to record prosperity or whether we'll allow Sleepy Joe to impose $4 trillion in tax hikes, ban American energy, confiscate your guns, shut down the economy and tell your governor to open up your state. You know, it's all Democrat governors, and I think they do it for political reasons, because there'll be less activity. You'd be doing even better if you had a governor that knew what the hell she was doing. You got to open up the state.
Speaking of politicizing the pandemic, Barbara Ferrer is the LA County Health Director. She did a conference call yesterday. You may not hear this anywhere else, but Barbara Ferrer said this, cut number 1.
School's going to need from us, and then what is the experience around cases and outbreaks when we open even for a relatively small number of people to be on campus. So we don't realistically anticipate that we would be moving to either Tier 2 or to reopening K through 12 schools at least until after the election, in early November. Like when we just look at the timing of everything.
Stop. After the election. Do you get it? Do you understand? People are keeping shutdowns in place until after the election because they think it hurts President Trump. Now, Long Beach yesterday announced that their city schools will not reopen until the end of January, and there's a rebellion going on. They may have turned Long Beach into Trump country, which is pretty hard to imagine. Donald Trump, by the way, wanted to make sure that Michigan knew where Joe Biden was on NAFTA. Cut number 30.
In fact, Biden was interviewed today on, there they are, CNN. No, he was just interviewed today. He was interviewed by Jake Tapper, who I find to be a nice guy. I don't think he likes me too much, but that's okay. He was interviewed on CNN, and they said, which is better, NAFTA or the USMCA? He said, no, the USMCA. And Tapper goes, what? Couldn't believe it. Said USMCA. He made a mistake. From his perspective, he made a mistake because he doesn't know what's going on. Even though he's right, he doesn't know. They were a little surprised to hear that. They gave him a few chances. Let's ask that question again.
We'll play some of Joe Biden with Jake Tapper later. The president's right. Jake is a nice guy. We're not buddies. We're not pals. We're not friends. We're no longer colleagues. We worked together in 2020, and we've had arguments since. But by the way, there's a kind of a made-up campaign against Jake for urging a candidate to run, Sean Duffy, to run in Pennsylvania. And it just Sean Parnell, Sean Duffy's from Wisconsin, Sean Parnell to run against Connor Lamb. And it's just kind of back and forth I have with a million candidates. It's a silly story. Don't bank on anything like that. Some of my friends on the right are making a big deal out of this, and it's not a big deal. And Tapper and I are not friends, but I just don't think it's a big deal. I just think that's a silly story. But what's not a silly story is what Biden told Tapper yesterday, and we'll come back to that after the break. There's a lot more. By the way, there's a lot of stories about Russia and China and the North Koreans and Iranians hacking us. The Russians are trying to hack us. They've targeted Dwayne. The Russians and the Chinese and the Norks and the Iranians, they've all targeted Dwayne. But you have to come to work and turn on your computer before you actually can be targeted. So they have not successfully targeted Dwayne. It's been remarkable. We have a 100% success rate. So we have the answer to all this hacking that's going on, which is you should hire Dwayne.